It's been over half a year, and I still think of Technoblade almost every other day. So I decided that it was finally time for me to make a tribute. I drew this picture, and I wrote this story, and I hope you enjoy. The Fall of L'Manberg, a Technoblade tribute. Singing, howling, crying, shouting, and begging, the frenzy of our voices only rose to a crescendo as Filza and Techno stepped up to the edge of the city that had wronged them many times over. Dream was already on top of the obsidian grid, the TNT dupers ready to go, built while the city inhabitants slept. Some of the inhabitants had noticed the grid, their eyes drawn to Filza and Techno standing on the hill as harbingers of death. They were not armored, their weapons clumsy to hand, and their arguments with one another still fresh on their tongues. They had been told that the attack would hold off until the next hour. They had been lied to. Foolish! Many voices howled. Foolish to believe that the artists of war would spare a single trick against them, or have any form of mercy left to give them. Idiotic that the cowards believed the words of those that they had hurt and betrayed. The rest of us silently mourned the days of peace and quiet, the moments of camaraderie that were found when things were not so unsure. We whispered about memories of grain waving hellos from the fields, and the only strife was finding enough time in the day to complete the necessary tasks of retirement. For better or for worse, nothing would ever be the same. The chanting began, quiet and sporadic, but soon enough the call spread. "Let loose the dogs of war," we cried out. "Let loose the dogs of war," Techno intoned. The howling of the dogs filled the air, no longer held back by their commander's word. Screams filled the streets as Techno moved, fighting and killing. Filza fell back to prepare the next blow. Some of us followed him, rustling and whispering our fears in between the rasps of his feathers. Blood and death followed both him and Techno. The lady stayed close on Techno's heels, soothing the moments before souls were wrenched from their bodies by his blade. The hounds were dying, their blood crying out for vengeance on the ground. The voices screamed in discordant harmony for the very same thing. Vengeance came in the form of withers, screaming skeletons sworn to destruction and pain, gore dripping from their empty rib cages. The chaos within us was becoming painful. It was loud enough that Techno was beginning to wince, though he never faltered in his fight. Withers wailed, men and women alike fought in confusion as potions rained down on the battle, the shards cutting skin and causing beads of blood to fly through the air. One last dance, one last movement before returning to dust. Filza's cackles could be heard nearby, just barely heard over the crackling of the fire. Houses collapsed as L'Manberg itself groaned in agony. The first explosion in the distance drew our attention, and we fell silent for just a moment. In the sky, flashing TNT fell from the obsidian walkway, dripping like red rain, blood from a gaping wound that had not been seen till this moment. The drips became streams and then torrents as L'Manberg screamed, torn apart brick by brick, limb from limb. We called with triumph and tears in our voices. Many of us watched this place grow from the small van it had been in the beginning. We cheered for it and cared for it as it was built and rebuilt. It was no longer the place it was when we believed there was freedom. Standing within the crater, Techno and Tommy argued. No, it was not an argument as much as two soliloquies on top of each other. Neither listened to the other, and we watched on in horror as the tears streamed down Tommy's cheeks. Our Tommy. Some stayed with him to comfort him when Techno left. He paused at the top of a newly made cliff, looking back at the destruction. We drowned in our watercolor aches as the smoke and rising ash swirled together with the last light of day. We left, victorious in the end, having lost everything in the process. Filza stood in the path, feathers dusty and hat covered in soot as he waited for Techno to join him. We lost almost everything.